Regulation. How intelligent accountability can stop bureaucratic excess and improve governance. Onora O'Neill, the British Equality and Human Rights Commission, and Cambridge University.
On the 9th of November 1989, I was with the Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin and went to Brandenburger Tor before the television cameras got there.
Ministers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, yes, I was there, and when you get there before the television cameras, it's dark, and you think, is anything happening? And what we saw was 3 men on the wall capering, and they were being hosed with fire hoses from the east, but they were not being shot, and the world was changing. It was still something that I will never forget and is etched in the mind. Now, I don't think I'm really going to talk quite to the title I was given, and I'll tell you my original title, which was bringing down the walls of fake accountability. That was thought a bit untranslatable. I hope to make it clear to you. Now, some walls, as we know, are age-old. Poverty is age-old. Some walls are rather new. The Berlin Wall wasn't that old when it went. It was about 30 years old. We're almost as far from the wall in Berlin coming down as that wall was from its own construction. So some of the things that have happened are pretty recent, and I think we could do without them and get rid of them and reverse what we have done to ourselves. And I'm going to talk not about bureaucracy in general. We won't get away from that. It's been with us since Babylon, and I reckon it will be with us indefinitely. But about specific inflections of bureaucracy that we have inflicted upon one another in the last 25 or 30 years. I'm going to talk about 2 things which are really trademarks, and they're supposed to be very respectable: accountability and transparency. Who could be against them? Well, I could be against stupid versions of both, and I think there are stupid versions of both all around us. Why did it happen? Mini history, potted history. As you know, it is said there is a crisis of trust. It is said that we are eroding social capital. It is said that there's much less trust than there used to be. None of these propositions actually stands up to very good empirical inquiry, but people are very worried that there is indeed a crisis of trust, and they immediately assume that that means a crisis of trustworthiness. So the remedy is more accountability for those who in the institutions and more transparency for those of us outside the institutions. Sounds good, doesn't it? That is the story. I don't think it's a very plausible story. First of all, the lack of evidence that trust has really declined. In most cases, we do not have the evidence. What we have is 2 sources of opinion. One source of opinion is a good range of highly respectable and talented sociological writing, both in German and in English, which tells us that we are eroding social capital, that we are, to use a famous phrase, bowling alone, that we have lost that binding, bonding, cultural glue of trust that holds societies together. You recognize the cliches, they're not so unfamiliar. But what gives us the real momentum, I believe, is much closer to home. It lies in our political and commercial culture, where pollsters ask about trust. Do you trust this political party to do that? Do you trust this sort of profession, that sort of profession? Do you trust this product or that product? Now, I think there are 2 contexts in which these inquiries are probably quite practical. If you want to be elected, you want to know which people trust you for what. And if you want to sell a branded good, for example, sorry for the cultural narrowness, a Mars bar, then Perhaps you want to know what people think about Mars bars. Do they trust them? And of course they could answer that because a Mars bar is a branded good, one token is just like the other tokens, and that's the way it is. But in real life, it's not like that. The questions have to be differentiated. Do you trust school teachers? Well, to do what? I might trust a certain teacher I know to teach the 5- and 6-year-olds to read, but no way to drive the school minibus. In real life, trust is a matter of judgment. It is the epistemology that counts and not the generic attitude. We want to differentiate our judgments. So the standard view says, trust has declined, we need more, we need to rebuild it. A claim, an aim, a task. I think the claim's wrong, I think the aim is wrong. I don't want more trust. I want more well-placed trust. And if you please, also, more well-placed mistrust. I want to trust the trustworthy, but not to trust the untrustworthy. And I bet you do too. So once you've taken that step, you don't say, we just want more trust. We want to have more assurance that we are placing our trust on the whole well. And that's where accountability and transparency supposedly help us. You might think, well, if the institutions and the officials and the professionals are being held to account properly, that's great, and so we can trust them more. However, the ways in which we have invented for holding them to account are very often hyper-complex, and there I do use the word hyper, and very difficult for other people to judge. The failure in the banking industries internationally was not because the forms of accountability lacked complexity. It was because they were impenetrable and also because they took a great deal of time to comply with, and they were not intelligible to most of us. Accountability has to earn its spurs. It has to be something that works. And I think we all know that the modes of accountability we've instituted in the last 30 years have produced phenomena that are really counterproductive. We have perverse incentives in some cases, the worst cases. We have sheer waste of time in other cases. I was chairing a little inquiry into the safety of of maternity services in Britain. And one midwife, and a Hebamme, said to us, well, you see, it takes longer to do the paperwork than to deliver the baby. What's gone wrong there? By the way, our maternity services are not the safest in the world, but they're very high up there. But that's what she was saying about the use of her time. As you look around the institutions, you see the diversion of time from primary tasks to the secondary tasks of accountability. I think we could think about that much more intelligently. We could have intelligent accountability. We could think about what's it really like for the people on the front line and in the back room if we impose the rigors of stupid accountability on them. It's not good. Now just a little stab at transparency. Transparency is, of course, immensely fashionable, not least in this city. Let's just wonder what it is. I think it's a very good antidote to secrecy. You put it in the public domain, it is no longer secret. That's one reason it's so popular. It's extraordinarily easy to be transparent. One click, Mr. Snowden knows all about this, and you've made it transparent. However, is that going to help people at large to place their trust with discrimination in the trustworthy? No, because they're not likely to find what is put out into the public domain. What we actually need is something that is much clearer and more audience sensitive. We talk about being the age of communication. I think we flatter ourselves. Many of our communication technologies bypass the audience. Not, of course, the mass media, not, of course, what is highly popular, but when our ministries and our institutions shovel out data to the world, we cannot expect people to make a judgment of them, of what's provided. We shouldn't say, oh, well, it's completely transparent. You should have read it. They don't have the time, they may not have the skill. So what have we invented for the masses? Well, we've invented league tables. That's a comparative measure of supposed achievement. I'm going to just fasten on one, rather unfairly, I did warn the minister, which is the new European University League Table. It has a delightful name. It's called U Multirank. And it is, of course, a product of the situation where the Shanghai Jiao Tong ranking of universities ranked most European universities outside the UK very low. There were institutional reasons why this was the case. The separation, in some cases, of teaching from research, other reasons too. U Multirank is supposed to be highly differentiated. I can bet you that it won't be. Of course, people will compound the rankings in order to reach a global ranking just like the Times Higher Education ranking. It's a waste of money. The European Union should be more sophisticated, but it hasn't been, and soon the joys of U Multirank will be coming your way. So my message finally is intelligent accountability is a good thing, stupid accountability we could do without. Intelligent openness, which communicates in ways that are accessible and accessible by the other party, that genuinely communicate, is a good thing, but mere transparency is part of the problem and not the solution. Thank you.